I mean, we'll jump right in. Would love to hear your experience with founding the EV team at Austin Energy and just the evolution of the program here.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity 10 years ago to co-found the team and lead it since its inception. And it has been the most wonderful work-related ride I've ever been through. And so I'm also jealous of people who are just starting that journey, because there really is a lot of opportunity to not only make it interesting and bring a lot of innovation, because it's a new business model as well as a new product for a lot of utilities, but to really think out of the box of how you can engage customers, how you can think about equity and inclusion and grid integration on something that could be the biggest load for utilities since the major adoption of air conditioning, or even potentially past that, if you look at the entire transportation sector.
Well, it's hard to believe you guys started this over, almost a decade ago. How did you even think about goal setting at that time before the wave had really hit?
It looked a lot different there. So 10 years ago, the thing that attracted me to this position is no one had done it before. The team hadn't formed. So I really did like that. There really weren't a lot of expectations of what a electric vehicles and emerging technologies team looks like, and what type of things we can do. What is the makeup of the team? What are the programs and metrics? So we had to develop those as we moved along. So the very first kind of metric or goal was removing barriers from EVs. Anything that looks like a barrier for someone to make a decision to drive an EV is, let's look at, so that barrier could be a policy, it could be customer experience at a dealership, it could be public infrastructure. It was really that perspective. And then our initial marketing campaign was, we were not selling a product. We were selling, once again, an idea. And so it was a very clean, very non-utility looking marketing. And it was a play on the word, the electric city is here, which also spells electricity is here. But with fonts and whatnot, it was very clean. And then we had a vanity URL, pluginaustin.com, which still exists today, because we wanted to make it a community idea, plug in Austin, and not be austinenergy.com/green/EVs or whatever, because this isn't a product. It is more about finding friends, finding allies, and engaging the community in a community-first approach, if you will, with Plug in Austin.
How would you say the community's perspective has changed over the last 10 years in terms of attitudes towards EVs?
Well, we've come a long way and we haven't come a long way. We've come a long way in that if you look at recent surveys, global surveys put the interest in someone's next car to be an EV right around 39-40%. where it was probably 1% 10 years ago. So you see a lot more knowledge of and interest. You also see a lot of acceptance as EVs being high performance and desirable. And that's a lot of thanks to how the Tesla and Tesla brand rolled out. They didn't roll it out as an economy car. It was desirable. There's a reason why the Tesla lineup spells the word sexy, and that was their branding. The only thing they had to change was the E was the 3, supposedly due to a potential IP conflict. But so they could capture people's imaginations. We did some early focus groups about why someone would buy an EV. The traditional thinking was it was to address climate and climate change. Those were going to be your early adopters. No, they were 3 out of 3 on the top reasons why. It was first and foremost, kind of fun and cool. Does this, look at my lifestyle? 2 is, can I afford it? And then a distant third was, I'm going to buy a car to address climate change. So once we understood the customer experience, how the words and how they're thinking, that helped guide our programs and once again, reducing those barriers.
One thing we've really noticed, especially as an Austin Energy customer myself.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You guys are really, you really do put an emphasis on that community focus, and you also tie a lot of innovation into your marketing. It's very unconventional. Just why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you guys approach marketing that's different than maybe a traditional approach?
Yeah, so I would say we looked at the traditional approach 10 years ago where I met with the marketing team and they brought in some samples. and they asked me, which one do you like? And I said, none of them. They were a lot of fine print. It kind of almost looked like an energy efficiency, like a light bulb rebate. It was that kind of design, very transactional. And so our next meeting, I brought in some campaigns I thought that more kind of had the feeling of what we're going for, because we're selling an idea. We're not selling a product, especially with 1.0 of our marketing launch. We're now in 3.1. And so the samples I brought in was an Apple computers. They had I just kind of like the design element. There was another one, it might've been Google, I forgot. And then to do a campaign, I did the Don't Mess with Texas, because that's an idea. Don't Mess with Texas is an idea about, taking care of not throwing trash out your window, et cetera. But they were selling an idea and trying to change hearts and minds. So that was the baseline. So that's when the Electric City launched. And then the electric greater than gas is 2.0. And now you're seeing some social media savviness bonded with it with Stevie, the EV loving T-Rex and other type of things. But I guess it's important to look at what your customer is expecting and be a little less concerned what you think the utilities image is necessarily. There's a difference between image and brand. Utilities a lot of times have an image of kind of being these stoic, quite frankly, not creative organizations. Utilities' traditional strengths is traditional engineering and safety. It's generally not around marketing and product development. That's just not where we've been as an industry. But when you're doing a transportation electrification, you have to learn best practices, how you brand and market with what a customer expects. So one, we get a lot of data. For example, for our search engines that we serve up information, the number one requested search engine that hits us is an electric vehicle. Electric vehicle and EV is still a technical term. People type in electric car. So even just little nuances, understanding how customers talk about your programs or how they look at the product and making your marketing and advertising, one, go with their values and what they're looking for. And then two, their language. I would much rather work on my team knowing a traditional or a typical customer's language and cater our programs around that and learning that through these other data and focus groups than trying to, a lot of utilities, what their default is, we have this language and now we're going to teach you our language and tell you these terms and inform you of how we work. And I think that's the wrong approach.
I'd love to hear a bit more about electric drive. I know it's gone through a few different iterations. And I think one of my favorite things that you guys focus on is just creating very tangible opportunities for the community to engage. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about kind of the inception of electric drive and where it is, in its most current version.
Electric drive is a designation in downtown Austin in the Seahome Eco District, and Seahome is a repurposed power plant. And what Electric Drive is a sustainable transportation showcase. What makes a sustainable transportation showcase? Well, per its name, there's some electric vehicle infrastructure there. We just reopened Electric Drive to have 8 DC fast charging hubs. There used to be kind of a pilot. There's solar powered kiosk and battery storage to plug in your electric bike or scooter or even personal devices. There's car share, there's bike share, which is now moving to electric bike share. And the street's been renamed from city council, there's banners. So it's a celebration space of kind of all things electric vehicle or more broader sustainable transportation. And I think fittingly how that fits into sustainable work, live, play was what an eco district is. And transportation is a big part of that. So it's just been a great place to generally now what we use it for today, in addition to just getting fantastic foot traffic and visibility, and I think driving a lot of interest, it's also a nice place where we launch new products or a company comes in to launch a new product, a new electric vehicle type product, or want to hold an event. It just makes the perfect backdrop.
What kind of data are you guys collecting from these hubs? Are you learning a little bit more about how people are actually engaging with their EVs, and how is that feeding back into the evolution of your programs?
Certainly. Well, one example we know in a DC fast charger, the average session is 18 minutes. how that influences our programs is two things. One is our pricing strategy is plug in per minute. There are some organizations look at, well, let's do kilowatt hours. The reason why we do per minute, and that's data driven, is if we don't put the per minute signal out, we expect that average plug-in time to go from 17 minutes to about 55 minutes. And the reason is when you do kilowatt hours is the last 20% of an EV sends a signal to the charger. And I don't care if you have a 200, 250, 300 kilowatt charger, the car is going to send a signal to protect its battery at 80% to downgrade it to 6 kW. So if you don't have a pricing strategy to have someone fill up at 80% and then move along and make way so you can have that 17 to 20 minute turnover, we believe it'll be closer to a 50-minute turnover because people will, instead of just getting a cup of coffee, they might do a little longer walk or a slower grocery run or whatever to take advantage. And they're still charging the whole time, but they're charging at a trickle rate. So that's one example. Another example is, so out of those 1,100 charging ports, we do heat maps to know where the usage is, both by category and location. One thing we've learned is workplace charging is your most efficient place to put charging out of the, I'd say, the big three business models. The big three business models for level 2 is workplace, it's retail, so a host wants to do it for their customers, or it is multifamily. The workplace charging really right now is the biggest bang. I think multifamily has a lot of opportunities as well. I also think there's opportunities. The data also shows us level 1 at multifamily can be a very affordable solution to make more ubiquitous charging and available charging available to residents than a next to the leasing office level 2 amenity. And so we have that data. So when we talk to property managers, we have that data. And when we talk about multifamily, you really have to split between property managers for renters and condos, which are run by HOA boards. From an EV infrastructure perspective, business model, how they want to go about it, those are two completely different approaches and demographics.
What are you guys doing on the residential side to help educate and then also influence behavior?
Certainly. And I think that's an excellent question because right now, about 85% of all charging happens at home. Only 15% is the public network. We see that number growing a bit, especially as you get more DC fast. But yes, the vast majority is at home. Out of the home charging, it's almost evenly split between someone installing a level 2 charging station at around 6.6 kW flow. And then the other half of that 85% just plug into a regular wall outlet like that and charge at 1.1. And so it's really about our strategy is just enough. The industry and the DC fast OEMs are saying faster is better. As an electric utility, I think the correct strategy is just enough. And what do I mean by that? So from someone plugging into a wall outlet, they'll get to about 3 to 4 miles of range per hour of plugged in. So if you're plugged in 12 hours, that's 48 miles of range. And if your round trip is below 48 miles, which the majority of trips of commuters are, that's all you need. From a utility perspective, that's a trickle charge that's happening all night. You are leveraging your heavy investments in infrastructure, your transmission distribution, and using it at traditionally off-peak times. Also, what we've noticed, what the data has told us, and anecdotally just makes sense, is the load curve is completely different for EVs versus your traditional residential customer. And it's important. I hear a lot of times utilities talk about EVs as load growth. And I think you're kind of missing the nuance there. Load growth implies more of the same. Where EVs isn't more. More of the same is more homes with air conditioners. That's more of the same. This is an EV. And so what the EV does is, one, when you look at a 24-hour load curve, there's a lot more that naturally goes at night. We also have programs like EV-360, and we've had demand response pilots that push off peaks as well through different incentives. And those are very effective. I would say even more effective than air conditioning load, which is the traditional demand response asset, because when you look at opt-outs, so the data shows us on our pilot is we had the expected amount of opt-outs of people when their room got a little warm, they opted out and turned the AC back down. From our pilot, we had 0.00 opt-outs on people with moving their EV load. As long as it's ready in the morning, there's a lot more customer acceptance on shifting that load. And then naturally, a lot more happens at night, because if you plug in a level 1, you're going to trickle all the way till you unplug the morning. And here in Texas, in the ERCOT market, we have the potential for an excess wind capacity market. Because if you've ever been in West Texas during a windstorm, I've been camping in it. It is for real. We can get a lot of generation at a time where traditional load doesn't need to serve it. But EVs naturally pair up with that kind of generation. So we're just really excited. And not only because you have the 24-hour different curve, you also don't have the seasonal adjustments. So a lot of utilities spend a lot of money in transmission and distribution lines to accommodate hot summer afternoons. And that's even how we are charged as a utility. Our transmission fees, it's called 4CP, is based on those hot afternoons. And so now we have a new customer class, if you will, EVs, that people traditionally commute the same amount of miles, whether it's a cool day, a hot day, or a spring day, or a fall day. So it just consistently delivers. So sure, there's some times where you're also driving during the summer, but you're also putting that same amount of miles and generally that same amount of consumption in fall and spring, et cetera. So once again, it's not just new load. It is a new smart load. And so here in Texas, I call it spice on a rib. Spice on a rib is a lot of value on something you've already invested in for very kind of low cost. And that's what really the natural shape of EV is. It's spice on a rib for Texas utilities at least.
So your EV program is based on 5 pillars. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
What we do at Austin Energy is we created the 5 pillars for our EV strategy as a way just to manage a portfolio. So in a portfolio, you'd have programs is typically how you do portfolio management. And under programs, you have projects. So these 5 pillars are basically our program areas, if you will. So one is there's the one utilities generally focus on first is infrastructure, EVSE infrastructure. So that's kind of one of the pillars. Is this an EV infrastructure play, if you will? The other one is fleet electrification and new mobility services. So how are we, looking at next generation? So whether it's we have a project with Cap Metro to electrify their fleet, we're electrifying the city's fleet. Also on mobility as a service, so transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. Third is equity and affordability, which we talked about that. And sometimes it might be laser focused on that. And a lot of the pillars might have a primary, but there's other pillars that obviously participate. Fourth is grid integration. So if we have all these EVs, in our territory, that's great. But how are we being smart about integrating those on the grid to maximize efficiency and affordability and our renewable portfolio? And the fifth one is what is the focus of kind of what Bobby and Amy will be talking about is the marketing and outreach. How are we engaging our customers and how are we conducting our marketing? So those are the 5 pillars. Those 5 pillars align with the Austin Energy Strategic Plan, and that strategic plan aligns with the City of Austin strategic drivers. So when you're looking at metrics, you always have to look, what is the end result? And how is that funneling all the way up to the Austin Energy Plan and the strategic drivers? If you don't have a clear pathway, then I would have you, really restate your problem or at least restate what you want your outcome to be to make sure you're aligned. Traditionally, a lot of alignment for EV programs and utilities is the environment, and that is a strategic goal of the utility. But we also play in the space of grid modernization, financial stability, and customer experience. We could almost argue we play in the space of every single Austin Energy component of the strategic plan. We have kind of components, but those are kind of the focus areas of where we're seeing the most metrics or most ability, not just today, but 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year. because we are just starting to see that explosive growth in the EV market, that compounding interest of EVs on the roads, the batteries getting bigger, the opportunity becoming bigger, frankly, from a utility perspective on a wide variety of metrics. I'm very excited you're going to hear from Bobby and Amy. They're very enthusiastic, and I think you'll see that passion, and my entire team is very passionate about their programs.
It's been 10 years since the start of the program. I remember when I started 7 years ago, the marketing campaign was essentially billboards and magazine ads to just get the word out that we were electrifying our city for transportation. Which, gosh, to think about billboards, we've come quite a long way since then. That was kind of 1.0, I think, in the marketing campaign. And then, as things progressed, we decided to update the campaign, and we came up with the idea because, EVs or electric cars is such a conversation piece to people. Like, oh my gosh, look at that cool car. Tell me more about that car. Is it like a golf cart? I remember people used to say. And so we came up with this slogan, the ultimate conversation starter. Like an EV is like the ultimate conversation starter.
I've seen that before.
Have you? Yes, there it is, right there. And so we started that campaign, and what we did was we tried to take it to the mainstream we did some marketing campaign ads with younger people, like on SUP boards in Austin that were on the lake, and and we had these taglines that would say things like, "Pump gas, I literally can't even." And so we came up with these funny lines, and that's when this was born. Electric's greater than gas. We were sitting around a room one day and just kicking around ideas, and we were like, electric's really greater than gas. Simple as that. And so that's how these shirts kind of were born, in the whole tag phrase of electric's greater than gas. And then where did we go? We went to 3.0, right? I guess is what we did. We wanted to start the conversation about how are you going to say goodbye to gas? So we came up with this campaign about how would you say goodbye to gas? And we started kind of interviewing people that had EVs and getting testimonials from those people. And then we met somebody special who wanted to join the team. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
That certain special
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
was a thought leader, millions of years of experience,
Yeah.
a scientist, and out in the field.
Yeah, I wanted to
And
intern
it's-
with us.
And wanted to intern with us, and the rest is history. Stevie, the EV-11 T-Rex.
That was quite a day when Stevie showed up.
Stevie came around at the right time with Austin Energy because we really were searching for an opportunity to sort of break the ice with people, so to speak. Stevie has a great way of demystifying the technology and helping EVs become approachable. And to have that conversation around affordability, accessibility, the less moving parts on those vehicles. And in our digital marketing campaign around Stevie really did help bring that narrative forward, which is really, helping open the doors for people to get into EVs. So, Stevie was just the perfect character to come into play at the right time. We find that Stevie is, becoming a viral element, not only here in Austin, but across the country. We're seeing other cities like Indianapolis create their own dinosaur campaign. It's actually Stevie's cousin, Dino the Dino. So we had a lot of interaction with that community when they created their campaign and wanted to really, replicate what we were doing here in Austin. We've been able to bounce off ideas and share some social media elements, and we're gearing up for a dance-off here in Austin, between Austin and Indianapolis, between Stevie and Dino. So those are just a few things that, we find were great tools in terms of marketing to just reaching everyday people. I just think it brings a lot of fun. Stevie brings a lot of fun to the technology and the topic. It can be, when you're talking about electric vehicles or transportation electrification, that can be sort of terminology that sort of leaves people out, feeling like that's not for me, that's for someone else. Bringing in a friendly, fun character like Stevie has really helped, break the ice. That Stevie campaign is just one of many that we have launched out in the community. Supports our overall goals around transportation, electrification, education. We have a program that's called EVs for Schools, which has become sort of the centerpiece of our equity for EVs in the community. The program combines EV charging with curriculum at public school campuses. And we deployed it by taking surveys in the school district to see what school really wanted this, would champion it. Were there anybody in that community that drove an EV that if they had a charging station at the school would charge there? Because we wanted to create this educational living lab where the students are seeing their teachers, their heroes, plugging into this infrastructure every day, and then they're getting the curriculum. And they become excited about it. And we have an outreach that we go into the schools. We get to meet the students and talk to them about EVs, bring out charging demo. We have a VR that we created that gets kids really excited to just jump in and see what it's like to drive an electric vehicle and to understand energy. And what we're finding with that particular program is that so many of the students understand climate impact. They really get it, and they're concerned. They understand that climate is going to be one of the greatest challenges of their generation. And so they want to be a part of the solution. So they're embracing EVs for Schools. We started in 4 Title I schools here in Austin, wanted to reach our economically disadvantaged communities so that they can get the conversation started at that dinner table, changing the conversation to talk about energy efficiencies and what can be done with electric vehicles and how people can see themselves in driving an EV or participating in other electric mobility opportunities like e-bikes or shared mobility. Our bus fleet here in Austin is going electric. This project with EVs for Schools has been very, it's been a wonderful way to speak to the kids who then speak to the parents. It really translates across to that generation. So we've seen a lot of excitement around it, and we've again started in 4 schools, and now we're in over 122 in Central Texas with this program. And we also are replicating the program with other cities, working with our other utilities and cities to help them create their own EVs for Schools program.
I love the idea of seeing a teacher plug in to a charging station and going into class and the kids seeing that. I mean, to me, that's powerful, right?
Well, and the kids are saying now, they see that and they're saying, my first car is going to be an electric vehicle.
Yeah, I also have loved going to the classroom with you and actually, using that VR experience with the kids and also just talking to the kids about electrification and transportation. And the kids are so smart. Like you said, they're already aware of climate challenges. And so it's really neat to see that go on.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that's probably my favorite part of the job is working with the students. They energize me, and I think that we're going to be in good hands with these future leaders.
For sure.
One of the other things that we've really put a lot of focus on that we're having great success around and we're growing this program is our EV Buyer's Guide. And I'll let Bobby tell you a little bit about that.
The auto dealership industry has always been a hurdle, and we've been looking at it for years now. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, members of our team would go out and engage in conversation with the dealerships, and we tried to do EV 101 classes with the sales team there, but the sales turnover was pretty high. And so then we would kind of lose that educational piece with the next round of salespeople. And then we had some pushback from the dealerships just in the sense of this new technology is hard to sell. At the end of the day, a salesperson is trying to earn money. And what's the easiest way to make money is to sell what they know, what car they know, what the gas vehicle that they know.
And we got a lot of feedback from the community that they would show up at a dealer, they're ready to buy that EV, they've done the research, and they get there and then they are being talked into buying a gas guzzler. So we felt like there was an opportunity here to educate sales staff and to provide the tools that they need to make it easier on them so that they can sell those vehicles and also improve that customer buying experience to help those customers that want to drive EVs get into those EVs.
if they're trying to learn more about an EV, we wanted to have this space for them to go to learn more about what does electric fuel look like to them? How easy is it to charge in my neighborhood or my city? Where would I go charge that car?
How far can I go?
How far can I go on
charge?
one charge? Yeah. It's more than just a buyer's guide. I think our vision was we wanted to take the customer experience and complete it from start to finish. We wanted to educate them on what car they wanted to buy, what would work for them, based on how many miles it takes them to get to work. And then
what's their budget?
Yeah,
they can identify, cars available to them in their budget. How many seats do they need? They have all those filters built into that buyer's guide.
Yeah, and so once they narrowed it down to the car that they liked, they could actually go online and see the cars that are available in Austin.
Lifetime inventory.
Yeah, live. That's updated 3 times a day. So it's real-time data. And so they can pick the color that they want, whether they want leather seats, 2 doors or 4 doors, and who sells that car for them. So now they can find that EV on a lot and go to that lot, know the price of it, and then go to that lot and test drive it.
And that buyer's guide includes some of the incentives that are available, including the Austin Energy rebates that we provide. It also highlights, and this was something very important to us, it highlights the used vehicle inventory, because we want to make sure that, people have access to this. A lot of people prefer to buy used vehicles, and we also know that the price point of that used vehicle is really going to open up that market to people who've typically been underserved around electric vehicles.
You know what I love about it? I love that the customer can go to the dealership and know what they're looking for and know it's there for them to test drive. And then the salesperson sees that Austin Energy customer come in from the buyer's guide and know that that person's already educated on the EV, and now they can make the sales process even that much easier. One of the things that we added to our dealerships that I think is a great tool is the kiosks. We worked with a company called Chargeway, and they, in my opinion, really explain electric fuel in a way that makes sense to everybody. And so adding these kiosks at the dealership, so imagine walking into a dealership and you see the car that you're interested in on the showroom floor in the parking lot, and then you have this kiosk where a salesperson has the confidence now to explain what electric fuel looks like to you. And so they can go show you that kiosk and show you where to charge and show you, you can even, one of the cool things about it that I love so much is you can actually put on that kiosk that you live in Austin and you want to take a road trip to Nashville or to New York or to LA, and it will show you all the charging stations available to you on that route.
Yeah, it really takes away that range anxiety that they say people have around this.
Yeah, which makes the sale of the car even easier for the salesperson. So they can sell more cars, they make more money, and then everybody's happy.
Well, and one of the things that we wanted to test was to see how many EVs could we help influence the sale of. And we had a challenge to do 5,000 in under 2 years, and we surpassed that goal. It was through the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge. And that was something that we did, and we felt like we're going to continue to grow this program. It's something that, we're not just going to set it and forget it. We saw that success, and we're going to continue growing it. I think all of this combined effort is really to help to move the community along. It's about changing behaviors. It's about shifting mindsets. It's about getting people thinking about alternative modes of mobility. How can we address the greenhouse gas emissions that are in our community, in our air? We really support the City of Austin's goals, which is ensuring that we are net zero emissions by 2040. And we've got to do it with transportation. So this is really what is fueling the work that we're doing here in Austin and helping us, drive change with electric vehicles.
Hello. Unfortunately today, Stevie couldn't join us for questions, but I do have Carl Popham here to help me out. Karl, I'll ask you a question to start off. That utilities tend to be fairly siloed from department to department, but you've impressively grown your EV program within Austin Energy. How did you coordinate internally with other stakeholder groups to avoid roadblocks and get buy-in?
Hello, and that was fun watching that video, and just really want to thank Bobby and Amy for their thought leadership as well as the rest of the team. So regards silos, that is a fair description. I guess a few advantages we have. I mean, one is we are a fully integrated utility. So under the Austin Energy umbrella, there's generation, transmission and distribution, customer service, sales, energy solutions, all that under the Austin Energy Public Power, third largest city-owned utility in the U.S. So that helps. Two, what we found is for major initiatives, we talked a little bit about Austin Shines, which is a virtual power plant with storage and solar, which includes vehicle to grid. Traditional project management, you have an executive sponsor, and that's just kind of how project management works. But we had a team of executive sponsors, in that case, 3, across the different silos, to use your words, to make sure we were involving all the different groups. And I would say, lastly, it does help, being a city utility as well, is a lot of my stakeholders are other city departments. So sustainability office, city fleets, Austin Transportation Department, and others. And then so we all have under the same governance. And I'll add one more lastly, and it really just starts at the top. So I got to give a shout out to Jackie, our general manager. She has created a very solid leadership team that works well together. I have never been refused a meeting by any other group or anything like that. We all have common goals, and we have some great leadership that kind of helps steer the ship.
That's fantastic. It's awesome to see that at Austin Energy. Next question. So as EV adoption grows in your service territory, how do you plan to address the grid impacts this will have?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So one is we do have a lot of pilots and program to look at grid impact. One of them is a vehicle to grid demonstration as part of a larger Austin Shines ecosystem. Another one with an ARPA-E grant, we did a demand response program with both our traditional demand response air conditioning as well as EV charging. We have a pilot EV-360 rate, which is an off-peak charging rate to encourage people to charge off-peak. And here's what we found with all those different programs. So the general strategy is do nothing. If you do nothing, there's still a value in that EV charging is naturally different than the traditional load or peaks is around air conditioning. There's what's referred to as V1G or demand response. Those are extremely effective, and the technology is there. For example, our EV-360 pilot, which our pilot group is 100 participant, shifting people off peak works 100% of the time with 99% of the participants. And then our summer DR program had 0 opt-outs. So what does that mean? There's a lot more efficacy and customer willingness to shift load in EV charging than our traditional demand response program, which is air conditioning load. And then there's the 2-way bidirectional flow of the vehicle to grid. Technically, it works great, but we don't think there's a business case yet until we get some larger fleet applications and more commercialization of bidirectional flow charging systems, but we're close. And that's why we do those pilots, to understand the technical issues and not just about yes or no, but yes, when these few more conditions apply.
Yeah. Wow. Congrats to the pilot team. 100%. I think you noted that's astonishing. So amazing work. We do have
it's all our customer behavior. And so we just plug it in and then listen. And a lot of this stuff I do talk about, we do have white papers available to include EV-360 has a lovely white paper published by a teammate, Lindsay McDougall, who managed that. And Austin Shines has over 500 pages of white paper content to include a deep down and vehicle to grid. So it's not about just us huddling these ideas and thinking, oh, we want to know, and this is for us. To achieve the bigger goals, climate action and grid resiliency, we need to share that information as well. So if you start off in your own program, you can at least have a baseline of what we learned over the years and then launch your own programs and initiatives.
That's great. And we can probably share that with everyone who's attending right now.
Yeah, go to pluginaustin.com and that will get you to my papers I talked about. That's a pretty easy one to remember.
There we go. a question as well as like a bit of congrats from the audience. So we noted, an audience member noticed that recently the Austin Climate Equity Plan was improved, which accelerates the goal of net zero from 2050 to 2040. And so they said congrats. And then also, how does the EV strategy evolve with this new development?
Yeah, so that's big news. That just got formally ratified Thursday. And one of the things I do talk about, I believe in that video, is how utilities should show leadership and be engaged, because you're either going to be at the table or on the table with potential unintended consequences in policy. So in this case, the Austin Climate Equity Plan, myself and another teammate were the co-chairs of the Transportation and Electrification Working Group. We worked with hundreds of stakeholders to gather that information, but by being at the table, we were also kind of look at what policies make sense and frankly, which goals or metrics didn't make sense for this kind of plan. So we looked at, to scale and efficacy and other kind of program elements to gather this. The biggest impact is a new goal to be vehicle miles traveled, not just percent EVs. It's actually kind of a bigger number. Vehicle miles traveled being 40% on the electrified platform by 2030. So even we're at about 3.5% of all new sales are EVs in our territory right now. VMT is probably only about 1%. So going from 1% to 40%. And the reason why we chose VMT, vehicle miles traveled, so I'd also say this is a lesson learned, because a lot of times when you start off, you look at number of EVs. Let's get 100,000 EVs on the road. And I've seen other climate plans talk about number of units. But in the day, we think percentage VMT is much more important because it addresses actually what you're trying to do, the emissions from the tailpipe. But it also puts you in concert with other working groups trying to reduce congestion on roads and public transit. And thirdly, it allows you to focus resources on high vehicle miles traveled applications, gig economy drivers, electrifying taxi, public transit, the future of autonomous driving, et cetera. So it's just not about residential adoption.
That's a really great point. Personally, I hadn't thought about the vehicle miles traveled. So that's cool to hear, a slightly different metric. Maybe on the vehicle miles traveled and just your customers' charging behavior so far, can you share a little bit about how well you understand that and how you analyze that behavior today?
Certainly. So, there's really two components. There's what's happened in the public network, which is only about 15% of all charging. And then there's what happens at home. That's 85% of your charging. So here's what we know. One, out of home charging, it's almost evenly divided between level 1 and level 2 charging. So 1.1 kW or 6.6 kW. So the most profitable, ideal charging for utilities is that 1 kW just plugging into regular outlet charging, because it's equivalent of running a hairdryer all night. We have potential excess capacity of wind. So that is, and it's quite frankly, very profitable new load and shifted load, because we have a 15-minute real-time market. That's when the prices are the lowest at the night for pretty obvious reasons. And you pair that with potential excess capacity of wind. So level 2 is people whose round trip is more than 30, 35, 40 miles a day. So they want to have that juicing, if you will, or a little bit more. We have a rebate to cover that. And the public charging, what we do see once again, EV charging is a completely different load profile than our traditional load profile, buildings and air conditionings. And public charging and private charging show the same things. One, we don't have the seasonal fluctuations that we do in the summer here to service air conditioning. And then also, we do have analyzed all our public charging against what we call 4CP, that's 4 critical peak. So that's a very important time for the utility to shave as much load or demand of your electricity as possible for various reasons, to include ultimately what your transmission charge is going to be back to ERCOT, the 4CP market. And then what we also notice, public charging as well as home charging naturally don't have a high volume of charging happening during those 4CP events. So typically hot summer afternoons, 4 key months during the year, hot summer afternoons.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. And thank you so much for joining us today, Karl. We love that your team's so creative and innovative, and we can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. I can't wait to share it with y'all. The team is cooking up some awesome stuff. It never slows down. Thank you.
For everyone else, we're going to hope to get you to the next session, and maybe we'll have a Stevie sighting next year. So
I heard a rumor.